In Nigeria, the Debt Management Office says as from June 30th, Nigeria owes 25.7 trillion naira in debt both domestically and externally. Present figure shows an increase in the debt stock of 1.32 trillion naira. DMO said that the current total debt stock comprised of both the federal government debt, that of the 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory. For the federal government, the DMO said it owed 20.42 trillion naira, while the state and FCT owed 5.27 trillion naira. Guarantee Trust Bank PLC has become one of the first few Nigerian companies to release their unaudited financial results for the third quarter period ended September 31st, 2019. Information contained in the results shows that the company performed well across all major financial indicators. The financial statement shows that the GTB generated 172.9 billion naira in net interest income over the past 9 months of 2019. This is indicative of 1.3% increase compared to 170.6 billion naira, which was generated in the third quarter of last year. On these stories, Arise business analyst Chika Mbonu joins me in the studios. Chika, it's good to have you with us.
Morning.
All right, very good. Now, let's take a look at the DMO office claims. What are your thoughts on the debt increase so far? It's running into trillions. And
well, I've asked us to, in this program to talk about debts and the level of debts.
Yeah.
And I said, to borrow is not a problem. And so the government has lined up what it has to do, and then analyze the revenue, available for it to do those things. And there's a deficit which it has to fund, both locally and internationally. And that's how the debt has risen. Remember also that we have suffered in the last about 2015, 2016, from the fall in oil earnings and major revenue line. And so that has led to the fact that if government had to do things they plan to do, they had to borrow from the market. Now, some issues there are important. Again, when you look at absolute numbers, it may not just give you the full story. Now, one of the parameters you use to measure the debt, quantum of debt of a country is what they call the debt to the GDP ratio. For ours, it's still hovering about 20%, which is good compared to countries of our size and age. But our major problem is consistently, like for example, in 2018, we use about 60% of our revenues to service these debts. So that's where our problem is. No wonder our Minister for Finance has said that Nigeria doesn't have a debt problem. What we have is a revenue problem. Because when we're dedicating about every $100 naira that we have, we spend about 66 naira of it to service debts. It means the paltry 37 naira is available to the government to do the other things they have to do for the citizens of the country. And that's where the problem is. That's the problem. So if the debt being accumulated is not for consumption, but for capital investment into the country, those capital investments will turn over, that the input and output ratio generate more wealth that will cycle around and pay off those debts. It's good for us. So that's basically what I can say about that.
Very good, Chika. Now, you have a scenario whereby even the states borrow from international lenders, and there seems to be no cap on the limitations towards their borrowing, and the government tries to make gains as to managing the debt, as it were. But then again, the states are also doing their thing. So what is the overall impact?
There's actually a debt management strategy. The truth is that before any state can borrow, they have to get an unction from the legislature, both at the level and national and state level. I do remember when the Kaduna State government wanted to borrow, and the senators from his states who didn't align with him actually opposed it, and then he couldn't get it. So it's not just go and borrow like that. But the issue is that what do they do with the debt? For the state levels are a bit worrisome, because a lot of states took bonds in the past for capital expenditures, but they're supposed to be monitored to make sure they use the money for what the purpose of which it was designated. But that didn't happen. A lot of states are owing backlog of salaries. So what you just see is borrow and consume, leaving debt for children of the states unborn. So that's the tragedy in that respect.
Yeah, and it also boils down to the fact that, look, there ought to be some kind of mechanism to actually checkmate the rate at which these, to find out if this money is actually being used for the purpose they meant.
Our constitution was properly structured in the sense that each state has its own legislature. Even the local government have their own legislature. and they're supposed to be the monitoring and oversight, carry oversight functions on these levels. Yeah. But the issue is that these people are not doing their work as you mentioned, and that's why we have the tragedy.
Very good, Chika.